This is the Digital Trust Podcast. In every episode, we strive to bring support to those of you who serve on the front lines and in the trenches of data and technology. We endeavor to bring understanding to the under-resourced and underappreciated, help remove your stress, and provide relief to your pain. Welcome to the Digital Trust Podcast. Sit down with us as we give you hard-hitting advisory conversations to help you build digital trust with your stakeholders and clients, and actionable takeaways to help you become a digitally trustworthy organization.
Thank you once again for joining us on the Digital Trust Podcast. My name is Christian, and joining me is a very special guest today. His name is Alan Jin, and he is the co-founder of the SafeHouse Initiative in San Mateo, California. Alan, welcome to the show today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So let's get right into it here. I'm curious to know all the details about the SafeHouse that you have time to share with us today, starting with the backstory. How did the SafeHouse Initiative come about initially?
So our company, and I will mention our company, Zero Down Software, we've been in business for about 24 years, and we primarily serve enterprises, Fortune government clients. So the small, medium businesses, it's a new animal for us, right? So in 2021 timeframe, 2022, our chief evangelist, Jeff Edwards, who you know, he had come to our management meeting and said, "Hey, I just read this report that in 2021, insurance agents or the insurance industry paid out roughly $18 billion in ransomware. And it was mostly small, medium-sized businesses." And it was a really interesting number because it sort of crept up on us. We hadn't been reading about it. And we've been asked a lot by CTOs if our company can prevent a ransomware breach. And our answer is always no. It's going to be pretty hard to prevent because, as you know, some of our founders are actual former breachers, pen testers ourselves. And so we were just casually having a conversation with somebody in the insurance industry, and it was Marsh, and it said, "Is this true? Is this number pretty big?" And it was like, "It's a lot bigger than that. You're not even close." And we got into an interesting conversation, and they had said, "So what is it that you guys do, and why can't you prevent a breach?" And we said, "Well, we help you with operational resilience. We can keep your site up running in another location in a shadow site." And so for the purposes of conversation, we called it a safe house. And so our diagrams are showing that we were running your operation someplace else. And they had said, "That's an interesting idea if we could provide that to our small, medium-sized businesses." And our question was, how would you do it? And they said, through MSPs. We insure most of the MSPs in North America. And if you could bring that SafeHouse technology to them, that would be great. Long story short, we didn't really know much about the small, medium-sized business. So we had conversation with other industry leaders. And so it was Access and then Allied and Alliant. And we started talking to the Hartford, et cetera. And they were starting to give us a bigger picture on what was happening in the industry. And lo and behold, we had found out through speaking to about 6 different insurance firms that there's 400 million small, medium-sized businesses that are underserved. They are under-resourced. And when we started to really poke into it, it was a little bit of a surprise to us because they don't necessarily have loads and loads of IT teams the way our enterprise and government clients do. And so their ability to react and behave was a little bit surprising. So we contacted a friend of ours over at IBM, and we're asking them, what are you seeing? And they said, well, we're seeing that the average cost of ransomware was about $4.5 million, which was not a massive number for what we were thinking, but for small, medium-sized businesses, we thought that was pretty big. And we had asked them, how long does it take for them to identify a breach? And they said roughly 326 days, which in the enterprise world of the government, that would be hardly
eternity.
Yeah, that would be an eternity. So we were like, well, what's the rest of it look like? And they said about 50% of these small businesses don't have any resources. So while churning this idea and having this conversation, we started to see this really interesting intersection between cyber and business continuity, the insurance industry, and small, medium-sized businesses. And we had a really interesting conversation with our friends over at Chubb, and they were saying business interruption is really a big challenge for the entire industry. And we said, so point that out to us. And they had said, well, as an example, cyber is $1 million problem, right? Going towards billion, but business interruption is $1 trillion problem. And that's when we said to ourselves, wow, this is a bigger problem than we had ever thought about. What do you think needs to be done? And so a collective of some of these insurance groups, we were speaking with them individually because we can't get them all on one call. We were just mostly interested. And they said the number one thing you could do to help us is to bring awareness to the small and medium-sized markets. And so we were like, well, who's small? Anybody that's under $50 million. Medium is anyone that's doing under $100 million in revenue. And some insurance companies actually increase those numbers. So small might be $100 million and under, and it might be $1 billion and under to be a mid-market customer. And so that was like a big deal. So we had said, let's help you educate your customers. We have a large network because most of us have been in the business for 3 to 4 decades. And so if we called on our peers, we could help you. What are you using to calculate managing risk? And they said the NIST controls, which at that point in time, we had said, no wonder the small, medium-sized guys aren't being able to support themselves, who can get through NIST. If you've ever read it, it's pretty complex. So we had agreed on a few really interesting aspirational ideas, and that was, one, we would take NIST and we would break it down into layman's terms for the average business person. And it could be, as an example, for my neighbors or having what we call a cocktail conversation with civilians. We call people who are not in technology civilians, and it's sometimes unfair to get in and start talking about DNS and all of this other stuff. And poor people are looking at you, cross-eyed, because all they want to know is what's the best printer for me, or what's the best laptop. And we're getting into IP as an example. So we had said, okay, we could do that. So taking the NIST controls as the framework, we started calling on friends of ours that really knew that area of NIST controls. So incident response as an example, backup and recovery. And we had said, would you contribute your intellectual property and knowledge and help educate? So we had agreed on a few things for the portal. There'd be no membership fees. There'd be no monitoring. There'd be no promotions from the contributors. So we don't call our partners or vendors. They're all contributors. There's no selling, and we do no tracking. So we wanted to make it a quote unquote safe place or a safe house where small, medium-sized businesses can come daily, weekly, monthly. They could land on there and they could say, I'm trying to learn something about MFA as an example. And I don't want to be tracked, and I don't want to go through clearing of preferences, and so none of that's happening. And so that was our guiding principle. We started with 2 of us, so it was us and a company called Interaction. We sort of just said, well, what do you think? Would you be willing to contribute decades of knowledge to write blogs, to write short white papers, potentially to do podcasts? And we said, yeah, that's a great idea. And then we started recruiting. And so we had, roughly 6 founding companies that started as contributors. So it was Canonical and Landsweeper. Canonical is the leading distro for Linux and Unix. And Landsweeper is a phenomenal company for doing inventory and being able to find out what you have as your endpoints. ConnectIQ, Zero Trust for governments primarily, and then Interaction and us. And our goal was, let's not focus on talking about what we do. Let's talk about why you need to understand this. Today, we have 33 contributors in about a year, and it's all volunteer.
It sounds like you're here to help those SMBs, particularly the 50% of those 400 million, so roughly 200 million SMBs that really don't have any resources, little to no resources when it comes to cybersecurity protection.
Yeah, so when I say 400 million SMBs, I'm speaking globally. And so our businesses are all global businesses, even though we're all based here in the United States. 50 weeks a year traveling around the world, most of us, and some averaging 30. And so we looked at the problem as a global problem. And so we said, how big is it? 400 million. In North America, there's anywhere between 42 and 50 million, depending on how you count them. That could be one or two people running a pizza shop. That's a small business. If their website is all they have to run their business, that's all they have. And so we said, let's look at all of them. And what we decided to do was take what we're teaching and consulting our enterprise customers and distill it down to the small, medium-sized company.
Yes.
And what was fascinating is we were having a conversation with the White House early on, and it said, this is an idea we have. What do you think? And they said, that's fantastic. The reason that that's fantastic is it's the small and medium-sized businesses that are propping up all of our economies. And not only that, but they're the supply chain to the Fortune customers.
Yes.
So that's why they're such a awesome target for the bad actors. And this is something, again, we hadn't really paid attention to because as incident responders, everyone's looking at the enterprise, the Fortune guys who are paying the large fees to get them back up online, spend millions of dollars for hardware and reinforcing their DMZ as an example. We never really thought about what happens to the supply chain when a small, medium-sized business is breached. And so that's really why that's our target, to help them.
So kind of bringing it down into the SMB level, what's the impact of a breach on the company itself? And then kind of the knock-on effect of that as well in terms of the people that those SMBs serve. In other words, their clients, customers, investors, stakeholders that put their trust in them to handle their sensitive information, for example.
There's a great report out that just came out July 9th of this year. It's the Risk and Compliance Matters report. You can find it online if you Google it. It's the state of cybersecurity for small and medium-sized business. And I'm going to paraphrase some of it, but then I'm also going to give you some real life examples that we're hearing from the very companies that we're serving right now. And so out of that report, I was reading, there's 78% of the small, medium-sized businesses feel that is the number one threat to their business is a breach. They also feel they're too small to be targeted, although they know they will be targeted. Their average breach from the insurance industry says in 2023, it was $3.3 million. It's already up to 4.5 right now per breach. And so what it really comes down to when we're looking at what's the impact to the economy, not just them, but also to the supply chain that they're supporting. So if you look at the United Healthcare breach that just happened, right? So it was Change Healthcare, and I'm not calling them out for the sake of calling them out. It's just that they're in the news quite a bit today. They figured out what they needed to do, and they had all of the correct response. They went to their legal team. They called their incident response provider. So they had the full gamut of support that you would expect someone like them to have. The group that did not have any support was the supply chain that fed them. Those small, medium-sized businesses today are still not up and running. That breach happened 6-7 months ago. And so what we're finding is, the SMBs, are trying to build trust with their customers, but they don't have the resources to help that happen. When it does happen and they're affected by the breach, they don't even know where to turn. As a great example, we were having a conversation. So we were smart enough when we started this SafeHouse Initiative.org that we don't really know the target audience. because we don't sell to them, but we do know a lot of information that we could pass on to them. So we went and we solicited an advisory board. And in the advisory board, we have someone named Pratik Agrawal who is really well known in the banking industry, Sheltered Harbor, risk and compliance. And we had said to him, along financial services and healthcare, we really need some guidance. What do we really need to be doing? And then we went to Neil Mullen, who's the business continuity Hall of Famer. He works for, a Fortune 500 building material company, one of the largest in the world. And they have 65 going on 85 small holding companies. So they're basically running small, medium-sized businesses. And he can see from a holding company all the way through the supply chain what this looks like. So what do we need to be doing? And then Roger Grimes, who just joined us recently on our advisory board, really well known. He really knows the challenges that small, medium-sized businesses are having through phishing attacks and email attacks, as an example. So we said, help us take this really large problem and help us focus it to small, medium-sized businesses where it really counts, not where it just feels good saying, let me teach you something. And what they had said to us was, let's treat our audience as though they have nothing. They have no cyber insurance. And that was not something we were initially thinking. We were thinking they must have cyber insurance. That's why they're going to be looking at this, right? And they just want to know more. No, let's treat them like they have no cyber insurance. Let's treat them like your neighbor who's running a small restaurant, rings your doorbell and says, I just got an email with a crossbone and a skull on it, and it's blinking in red, and it says, you need to pay me or I'm going to shut your business down. What do you tell them? What do you do? And that's where it really came at us, which was we really need to be thinking differently, and we really need to be focusing, especially since we're not monetizing any of our time. We needed all of our time to really be focused on them. And that's when we started finding out and getting some feedback that really what they want are 500 and 1,500 word blogs, just explaining what is it. I don't really want a white paper. I don't want a lot of graphs and pictures and stats. Just tell me what I need to do. When we started doing our podcast, and I may be getting ahead of the questions that you'd like to ask, when we started doing our podcast, we were initially going after the really big messages that we thought the insurance people wanted to get out to their clients around risk. And that was the way we went. So we had David Finson and Adam Roth on talking about risk. And it was, in our minds, a fantastic podcast. And it got great following. But the question came back to us through our advisory board, is the guy running a restaurant going to listen to that? Is he going to know what to do with that? And so we started to frame it very differently. We also made sure that our target goal for our podcast were 15 minutes, not 1 hour webinars. And not because 1 hour webinars are bad. Those are great for technology guys. We love that stuff. We love the slides and we love all of the examples, but for a small, medium-sized business, it means nothing to them. So anyway, that's
completely agree.
That's the direction that we went in, and that's where we started getting input from the small, medium-sized businesses. That the small businesses primarily saying, "Yeah, that's what we need. This is what I want to hear." Yeah,
It's good that you're listening, Alan. It's good that the whole group is listening and taking that feedback and adjusting as you serve that SMB space and reaching them. Two more quick questions. We have a couple of minutes left here as we draw near to the close. Ultimately, for the SafeHouse Initiative, what do you envision as the ultimate goal, the future plans?
Oh, so the ultimate goal is that we would not stand alone. We would be a portal or a conduit for even more information. So we know, I mean, we know that on our podcast, we're getting anywhere from 1 million to 2 million listeners per podcast. And we've heard it's good. We're number 1 in Serbia. We're number 54 in technology on the Spotify podcast. So somebody's listening to us, but that's not enough. So we started to get, and this is what surprised us, we started to get people from South Africa and India, the UK, New Zealand, reaching out to us on the site saying, "Hey, I love what you're doing. How can I contribute?" And then we would get on a call and we would, just say, what do you like about it, and how could you contribute? So we were talking to Simon Newman over at the CRC, the Cyber Resilience group in London, the UK. Fascinating organization. They're literally on the street, walking Main Street with police officers, going door to door to the shopkeepers and educating them. And I think that's fantastic. And so we had a great conversation with them, and we also did a podcast with Simon about what he's doing. And we started then brainstorming, how could we do something like that? And Simon had said to us, "Well, you have a platform that I don't have. I'm going door to door, and it takes time, and yet your reach is wider than ours. Wouldn't it be great if we joined forces?" And we said that'd be fantastic. We will make all of our information available to the CRC. And we started doing that in Pune, India, with FitCyber. And we said, we'll make all our information available to you as well. And in South Africa, we started doing the same thing. So we're literally letting everybody that is trying to reach small, medium-sized businesses that you can have our content. We curate it. We make sure there's no selling and marketing in it. It's intelligent information. It's information that we were told could be shared at the university level with academia. So I have started to approach universities here in California to see if they would like to have us get up and present and then start to share our information with them. Why not start getting the kids in college aware of this before they finish school and with a computer science degree, find themselves in a job and they're keyboard down, not really focusing on what's going on literally around the world, because that's not what their job is, but making them cyber hygiene aware. And so we're taking it there. Love to figure out a way to take it to high schools, because we would like to have our high school students be able to be just as cyber aware with hygiene as they are with WordPress, as an example, or PHP and Java, because they're learning that in high school. I think we need to teach them the rest of this as well. So ultimately, we'd like to get it from small, medium-sized businesses to schools, to academia, where they will take it and run with it. And then we would like to figure out a way to get it down to the high school level, where everybody's being exposed to what they need to know to be safe on the internet and secure as they're doing business or working as well.
Love it. I love that vision. And I have no doubt that you will get there along with all the contributors. Last question. We've got probably 1 minute left.
Sure.
In present state, the SafeHouse website, which we'll put a link to in the description here. Alan, what can these SMBs expect when they get there? What resources can they expect to find, and how do they access them and get this guidance?
So the website itself is actually, we're growing that website along with the way that we're growing the content. So the first thing that they'll see when they land on the website is they're going to see we're not asking them to log in. We're not asking them to give us their name or an IP address or anything. Just come, scroll through it. We have a page which has blogs, and the blogs are listed basically by topic. They can actually run in the search bar and they can say, explain NIST. And we have people that are actually explaining what the different NIST controls are and how easy it is for them to go look at it. Then we also have a tools section. So here's the one thing that is a little bit of a pet peeve, as a former vendor myself, right before I got into the SafeHouse Initiative. Anytime there was a great tool, we would try to keep it to ourselves. Or we would say in tech babble, oh, I've got this great tool that does this. It allows me to check out your endpoints. And I never tell you what it is. Well, what we decided to do is we decided to take all the tools that the contributors use and make them available to small, medium-sized businesses. So we say, as an example, if you want to look at how outages across the United States, there's a map in there that a contributor from Liz Briswell, an attorney, a law firm that specializes in this, makes available to anybody that wants to go look at it. So we asked the contributors, go back to your companies and ask them, would they provide tools for free that anybody can use and is not very complex? So you'll find those tools. And then I believe the number one thing that everybody comes to the website for is to listen to these 15-minute podcasts, because we take a lot of techno babble and we explain why you need to understand multi-factor authentication. We try not to use acronyms, MFA and phishing resistant, all those great terms, great for selling books and great for selling products, but not great for implementation.
No, and not great for SMBs either. I love what you said about putting NIST in layman's terms. I resonate very much so with that mission.
Yeah.
Very good. Alan, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, for the insights, and for sharing about the SafeHouse podcast. No doubt we want to hear more, so I'm sure there'll be some questions arising from this. We'll have some follow-up conversations. And I want to say a special thank you to the viewers and listeners who spent your time with us as well, and for joining us in the conversation. And we will see you all on the next episode of the Digital Trust podcast.
Thanks for joining us today on the Digital Trust Podcast. If you found this conversation helpful, please share it with someone you care about. And if you'd like to receive our monthly newsletter, please click the link in the description to subscribe. And to put your mind at ease, our newsletter will include episode summaries with key points and actionable takeaways, plus a heads up on the upcoming episode guests. Rest assured, it won't be a spammy sales message, and we will never sell or share your information. Thanks again for tuning in, and we will see you on the next episode.